Good afternoon. Good afternoon, commissioners. Savannah Clement, Public Services. I actually just wanted to pop in and give an update on the annex building. We had a new roof placed on it. Actually, due to the weather event yesterday and some temporary drainage, we actually had considerable water on the first, second, and third floor of that building, mainly directed towards the lowest point, which happens to be the east side, where we've done all the work in that first floor Compass building. So WeatherGuard's been out cleaning up the water. We're working with Risk on a potential claim, and we're just trying to dry it out right now. So, but we found the cause, which was the biggest point we wanted to figure out first, and then now we're doing cleanup. So
potential claim against whom, by whom?
Potentially, it would be, the roofing company. I don't mean a risk claim on our part. It could be a potential insurance, just because of the nature of the project and the damage that could potentially be there. So not a whole lot of information. Again, we just found it last night and we're doing cleanup today. So that's all I have on that.
Good to find it early, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. We're bringing back from a previous workshop on personnel, we're bringing back juvenile detention and some data that y'all had asked for.
Thanks, George.
I'm going to hand it off to George.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. George Moya, Juvenile Court Administrator. Thank you for allowing us to come back. I did hand out a package that will give you some slideshows with what I believe is the data that you requested. So bear with me as we go through this. There may be a lot of information and we can dissect it as needed. Your first slide is essentially our current coverage in detention, and this is just a week's view. You'll see that we have three major shifts that covers the whole week, 24/7, graveyard, day shift, and swing shift. This is our current operations as it stands. The second slide is based on the two requests, the two FTEs, and what that would bring us up to.
So this first one, and it looks pretty obvious. All this yellow is what contributes to your overtime right now?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And the second one is the difference in that if, and here's the big if we were fully staffed with the two FTEs that we're requesting. Again, I just want to reiterate, the two FTE staff will put us essentially head above water, the way we see it. And that's just to operate at a minimum staffing level, which would barely cover us and give us enough wiggle room to cover sick time, vacation, FMLA if needed. This year is new to us, the comp time situation. The collective bargaining agreement allowed for comp time for our detention officers. This was the first time that's allowed. So in lieu of overtime, they can accumulate comp time, which is something that I neglected to put in here to see how much comp time has been accumulated in lieu of overtime that we're not seeing as part of the overall overtime budget expense. And the third slide is essentially both back to back, so you can actually see the differences there.
George, when you're saying capacity, you're talking about staffing, not population.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, staffing, as you'll see, if you look at just, for example, the current detention coverage per week, if you see the graveyard, and you'll see towards the bottom on the left-hand side of that graveyard column, essentially outlining what are the posts needed. we're seeing that the staffing minimum for graveyard is four staff for that graveyard shift. If you look at day shift, 5 minimum staffing for that day shift, and for swing shift is 5.
Okay, so graveyard, you're 1 staff down.
Correct, because
Reading that right?
we don't need to occupy 2 staff per pod.
Day
At that-
shift, you're 2 down.
I'm sorry?
Day shift, you're 2 down.
Correct.
Okay,
Mhm.
just so I'm reading it right.
Yes. Mhm. And then the next slide is the accumulation, or I'm charting what for example, for 2023, we broke it down for that year. The next one you'll see is 2024, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. If we stick to the 2023, I broke it down to see what the extra help cost is for that month in 2023. And I put all 12 months from January to December. That same column in January will give you the breakdown of overtime and the average daily population for males, average daily population for females, average daily population for unknown, as we also have that, and the average length of stay. So all within that same column for January as an example.
When 2023, this overtime at 1.5, that's actual dollars that we spent.
That's the cost for January. So as an example, January 2023 overtime cost was 20,519
Okay.
versus what part-timers would cover at 10,802 essentially for that month. And you see the trend, the overtime expense is just much more than it is being covered by part-time staff. If you want to look at 2024, clearly we don't have data for November or December. The only difference for 2024, October, it only covers 1 payroll period. You see the same trend in 2024. The expenses for overtime are just much more than the extra help for part-timers. And if you look at the other one, I broke down the 2023 versus 2024. The total overtime expense when we were looking at it was 267,000 for 2023. And we try to isolate just the coverage needed for officer in charge, which is the supervisory type of positions that we're requesting today. You see that of the 267,000, 164,000 of that is going towards the overtime for the staffing position that we're looking for, a supervisory position, supervisory role. And I gave you the same numbers for 2024 in terms of the same overtime expense, overall overtime expense, and then the overtime covered by officers in charge. The next one is just comparison side by
This one.
side.
Sorry. The highlighted yellow 164,911 and the 175,315, that's overtime we're paying, but if the 2 extra staffers, is that the part that goes away?
That's a tricky question. I would like to say yes, but the truth of the matter is, in theory, if we cover the supervisory roles that we are clearly seeing as overtime covered by officers in charge, in theory, yes. But I say it's just in theory because we can hire 2 new lead positions and I may have 2 people exiting the facility. And we're constantly kind of doing that. And so the overtime expenses.
If it stayed the same, that would be the savings.
Right. Yes, correct.
We understand there could be
Mhm.
fluidity and
Right.
employment stuff. Got it.
The slideshow with the comparison for 2023 and 2024, they're just side by side. Also provided the chart for 2023 expense, and that's just the overtime, so you could just see the visual and the trends. Did the same thing for 2024, and that's part-time versus overtime. The next slideshow is hours covered, I believe. Oh, no, that's 2023 expense, 2024, side-by-side comparison. Sorry, my apologies. And then we get into the slides with the actual breakdown of hours for 2023, 12 months, January through December. 2024. And then the side-by-side comparison. But I think the most telling is the slideshow where we're seeing the two pictures with the actual detention coverage based on 1 week. If you see the comparison, I think it gives you a better understanding of our need.
So we're paying more in overtime wages than we are in just regular wages? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, so for this year alone, we do have a surplus in our wages because
And that's all
we
at
don't, we have.
time and a half, so we're paying a rate above normal wages, and there's more hours. Looks to me like there's more hours at that time and a half than there are at regular pay.
Yes, and overall, that would be bad business too. If you're just relying on a lot of overtime, your burnout seems to happen, then people start having sick time. And again, we're just not adequately staffed to even cover that. And right now, we currently have 4 shifts that are vacant.
Can I ask a question, clarify? Are you looking at the chart that says regular extra help
I'm looking
when you're
at
comparing it?
this one here, Kathy,
Oh, I got my
because it's
glasses.
showing
It's looking at the hours.
overtime hours at time and a half in
Oh.
red.
Okay,
For 2023 or 2024?
Well, both years
Right.
are above.
Mhm.
And I get using overtime in peaks and valleys, but it's,
Yes, we have this upside down. We would prefer that the overtime expense was the blue one versus the orange. Yeah, the overtime expense, and you're looking at the hours, there's just a lot of hours that are going towards overtime. And yes, it's at 1.5. Not to mention, there's also differential shift pay. If you do an overtime on a graveyard versus a day shift, there is differential pay for graveyard and swing shift. So that contributes to the overtime expenditure.
so would we not have savings just from the fact that you switched 2 people to regular hours to fill that instead of paying overtime? Would we not? I mean, it
If we-
seems like that would be the case,
Brian,
right?
if we were fully staffed and we had our wish, there would be a savings. Mhm.
their request for 2 FTEs with benefits fully loaded was 184,000. And as you can see, the overtime, just in the overtime, we're looking at 100 and, I'm sorry, there's the number. We're looking at for this year, so far this year.
175.
Mhm.
Just this year alone, 175, and we're still a couple more payroll periods before December 31st.
Yeah.
You
And
have no plans to fill the positions that you're taking these from? Because aren't you transferring these out of one area and putting them?
No,
in
no,
this
no,
area?
these are 2 new created FTEs. Mhm.
but they did in their budget, go through and review their current positions in juvenile
In the
probation.
probation side of things, yes.
And they
sorry.
did reduce 2 FTEs.
Correct.
Yes.
Mhm.
this helpful?
It's not quite what I asked, but it brings up other questions.
Mhm.
This is a tough one for me. Why are we at this today when I have 2 years worth of records saying that we could have saved money in the past by hiring 2 people before? So, okay, go ahead.
Pardon, can you repeat the question, Commissioner?
You have, you have a lot of numbers here, and then going to the chart that the chairman just looked at, if what you've answered several times, that in fact, the overtime expense in total has exceeded the non-overtime expense in total. And that has gone on for all of 23, according to this, and all of 24 now. So my question is, why is this an issue now? Why wasn't it an issue 2 years ago? Because, you know, I'll stop there.
Well, I think it was a problem 2 years ago, but if I remember correctly, the leadership was undergoing kind of a pretty traumatic transition. They should have, you know, yes, that's right.
yeah,
That should
but-
have been brought up to us, but
Right, I mean.
the thing that irritates me more than the excessive overtime is that we're serving so few kids with all that money. I mean, no, there's not another department that has that kind of overhead.
Mhm.
There's probably nothing we can do about it because the rules are the rules and they've changed the rules on us. And without getting a report back that
Well, that,
this is an excessive amount of resources to address a relatively small problem. I don't want to dismiss the kids that are, you know, that we are serving, but my goodness.
but that is why I wanted a number per individual hour. Days, half days, what, it's, doesn't give me a number that I can take to the legislature and say, look, you know, we're paying so much for so much. Let's figure out how to solve the problem. I take a look at your organization as one deeply interested in doing the best for the kids, and I don't see it reflected here. All right.
I am supportive of the change, kind of reduce that over time. We've got other structural problems that need to be addressed, and that's, you know, the whole situation of only having a relative handful of kids, and yet we spend an awful lot of money. I don't know what the alternatives are, but it seems like consolidation with other counties should be allowed, but then you get the arguments, well, they need to be close to their
Yeah.
family.
But I tend to agree. I think those bars need to flip, although there's bigger issues here with
Yeah.
the, just at the dollars. I don't know if we probably run, I don't know, I give it an average. I see it go from 8 to 12 to whatever. If you give it just an average of 12, just on overtime alone, that's expensive per kid. That's not even full wages. And that's not really your problem. It's, I get it. It's a 24/7 thing that's got to be staffed. But it is something the legislature should pay attention to.
I would wholeheartedly agree. If I compartmentalize those two issues, the issues of the population, that's one issue. And I agree, legislature needs to probably step in because these aren't just Cowlitz County kids that we're having in our detention facility. We're right next to the I-5 corridor, so we're getting kids from Clark County, Clallam, Pacific, Lewis. They're coming from all over the state. So so if we compartmentalize that, yes, that's one issue. Totally agree. The issue here that I'm trying to address is the operational issue that we have with our 24/7 facility. And that's something that I like to be above water. One, to tackle the overtime issue, and second, to see if we can adequately get to the shifts that we need, while at the same time covering vacation, holidays, comp, FMLA, and all that. Otherwise, we're right back to the same issue of using the overtime to cover shifts again. Unfortunately, our hiring process is not as swift as we would like, but we really have to vet people so that we don't have tort claims, so that we don't have issues. And even so, we just can't predict. And our hiring can take anywhere between 3 months to 6 months to go through that. And it's a full
Yeah,
background investigation.
Please don't go there. You just showed me 2 years of shortfall of hiring.
Mhm.
So 3 months to 6 months, I just about, well, on and off throughout my tenure, I've tried to figure out if there's anything we could do down there. And I just haven't sensed that there's any appetite to change anything, to improve things. My last foray into it was trying to get a hold of folks in Lewis County and you, and that almost seemed like, to me, my impression is nothing concrete. My impression was I stirred up a hornet's nest because nobody wants to concede anything. Certainly the Lewis County, when I talked to one of the commissioners there was interest, but it went to, I guess they have a county manager, or they've got a manager that they directed me to, and he was not at all interested. And I cannot imagine why someone in that position would not be interested, because if you can help twice as many children with the same amount of dollars, you're doing something. And there just hasn't been an appetite that I've detected, and I'm trying to stir up that appetite.
Yeah, you're well over into the 20s easily per child.
I noticed that you use quite a few part-time individuals. Now, they're not getting paid overtime. They're the extra help.
Correct.
Are there cost advantages with having the part-timers be the full-time equivalent? I mean, how many part-timers would you need to make up the FTEs? And the reason I say that is they're already trained. The attempt is reduce that overtime pay and the overtime stress on your full-time regulars.
Right, and we do have, let me see, if I look at back to the first one, we currently have 17 part-time staff. So the list is there. Unfortunately, the shift that's required to fill that may not be for a part-timer, it may be for a supervisory type of position. And that's where we're seeing the overtime expenditure. And we can't put a part-time staff in a supervisory position because they're part-time. They're not here, they're not adequately caught up with all the business. And we may see them 1 month and we won't see them for another 3 months before they start covering another shift or 2 or 3.
Could you refresh my memory? You're asking to bring in 2 new people at a manager level, if I recall
Yes.
correctly, but not at the staff level. Okay, just needed to be sure I remembered that accurately. What happens if you bring 2 people on board now at the staff level, non-managers?
Well, we would, the way the process works, we would have two new positions that are available. Those are promotion type of positions for a lead. So it won't go out to the public. It would be internal. I would see potentially two folks that are currently officers in charge, but not leads, can put in for those positions and potentially obtain those positions. So we'll see the promotion and the movement, and those two vacancies will allow for the public to fill, or maybe a part-timer who may wish to change from part-time to full-time.
What I'm really asking is not what is the internal machinations to get promotion for your current staff, is what's the imperative to make them to have a manager rather than a staff to come in? From these charts, all I see is open slots for an officer.
Well, if we continue with that, we're going to continue to have the overtime expense, because officers in charge will still accrue at the 1.5 expenditure for overtime. And on top of that, maybe differential if it was for swing or graveyard. So, and that's what we're seeing right now. Officers in charge, they're not leads, but they have been trained enough to fill a supervisory role.
So if you were to spoon feed me the RCW, you would point out where the only way to fill in of the yellows that we see here is with these two positions designated as they are, not just an officer, but a manager.
I'm not sure I'm gathering what you're asking. I don't think there's an RCW that says I need a manager, but operationally, I would prefer someone who's adequately trained and can make decisions so that we continue with business and function without having to go through so much rigmarole.
You're currently operating without the managers, right?
In certain areas, yes,
Yeah.
which allows for an officer in charge, regular staff who has been trained to fill those roles, but it comes at an expenditure, overtime expenditure.
Guess I'm still confused. There's a difference between an officer in charge and a manager?
There is a lead detention officer. So officer in charge is just a full-time detention officer who has been trained to take on officer in charge duties. But we currently have 3 leads right now for a 7-day a week. And 3 leads for 7 days, we won't be able to cover that.
We're trying to get to 5 leads.
Correct. To adequately staff those, correct. In doing so, we would create less officer in charge opportunities, which will not contribute towards the overtime.
Well, I think we need to reverse that red line, and I'm still kind of, so we're not really looking for officers in charge. We're looking for 2 leads.
Correct.
So, and currently you have people doing, if they do as a lead, if they're not a lead and they do the duties that you call an officer in charge, then we have to pay them the time and a half.
Correct.
If they're a lead, they fill a role, so we're not in the overtime.
Yes, an
But
ideal,
but the lead is different than an overall manager.
correct. Ideally, you would want your officer in charge to be filling in roles where as needed, not we're currently using them and plugging them in for daily operations. And that's just not sustainable.
But we're adding staff to this division, but we're eliminating 2 positions in another division, so the overall pie is no change.
Yes.
Yeah, I prefer not to look at it that way, because they're really independent functions, right? And the concern I have here is that I don't understand what is going on because it just doesn't seem to add up to me. And I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I'm opposed to lack of understanding it, and I'm opposed to being presented something to elicit a particular response as opposed to just saying, this is what it is. Like we currently operate in a way where our overtime, for some reason, is hinged to a manager. I mean, here's the way it looks to me. You want to promote some of your people that you have in there now, and you're trying to use this opportunity as one to do that. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I am opposed to not being tuned into what you're really trying to do. And I am unhappy that it's lasted for 2 years, and I'll stop there.
It's not, I can let you know it's not for promotional. It is for a need that we currently have. If
I'm
it was promotional, I think we would be before you asking for to reclassify 2 current detention positions that we have into a lead. But we are so understaffed that the request is not that. The request is for the lead roles to cover the 7 days a week that we have. And we can't do that on the backs of 3 people only.
You've got such few staff that, are you trying to convert a lead position to a manager position?
No,
What is it? In the past, I tried to look into this, after when Steve Jones was in charge, and at that time I was talking to a brick wall. And I'm trying to figure out, a manager isn't someone that just has a title that says manager. They actually have an obligation, a workflow obligation. And if you would address that, that would be a good thing. I see with so few people, I don't know how many tiers of management you actually need. You have a lead and now you want a manager, but are there any Indians, if I may use that expression?
I currently have 1 detention manager and he certainly can't cover 7 days a week. And this is why we have leads. Leads will take on that responsibility and make decisions at a level that they're allowed to.
Right.
To
Why don't
make-
we hire 2 more leads?
That's the
That's what-
request.
That's the request.
So I asked and you said, no, it's for a manager.
No.
It's-
Everything that we've presented to you is for 2 lead detention officers.
Yes.
Didn't I just ask for a clarification on what it was, to refresh my memory, what it was that you were asking for? And I said 2 managers and you said yes. It was just miscommunication.
Maybe miscommunication, yes.
There's, and I'm not Lewis and the other places that have these centers aren't serving kids that use the service. I don't want to see our problems or me, there are issues here that go larger. Need to really legislate, but the issue, if we can fix this and cut some of that cost, get that under, although I want to monitor it over the next year, I want to see that line come down. Probably good on these two leads if we see some results next year, although I think it's a way bigger problem that we need to.
Yeah. Are there, so you've got a manager. How many leads do you have?
3 leads.
3. And how many of the other do you have? But
Officers, how many?
just
Detention
plain
officers.
Oh,
officers.
detention officers. You'll see on the chart over here of our current coverage.
I could just use
We have 11 full-time officers.
11 and then three leads and 1 manager.
Correct. And we have 4 vacancies currently. And we also have a part-time staff list.
Are the leads split between graveyard, day shift, and swing shift?
Yes. Mhm.
So you don't need another lead, except on vacation time. Is that what you're trying to fill?
No, they currently don't have leads for Saturday or Sunday right now.
Okay,
That's when they're using the title off.
Correct.
Putting somebody as an officer in charge, and that's the one we're
Correct.
paying the time and a half.
Correct. And just at a week's, you'll see,
and I'm pretty sure by RCW, you need a lead on the floor, right? Or you need a lead at all times. I
I'm
would
not
guess.
aware of an RCW per se. No.
No? Okay.
There's not an RCW. It's best practice. It's for the safety. It's the risk that is out there if we don't have the proper protocols, the proper people in their places to serve these youth. So there's not a mandate by law. It's a mandate by
Thank you.
the setup.
For the public,
What's that?
would you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Judge Marilyn Hahn, presiding judge, Superior Court.
Thank you, appreciate that. So what's the difference between the salaries? I'm afraid I'm trying to really understand, and the difference in the dollars isn't going to amount to anything
Mhm.
that'll swing a decision. How much between a lead and an officer?
The lead officer is in the I just looked at one, 61,000 annually. And a regular officer is in the 50s.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with a lead versus officer kind of
Yeah.
argument here.
You good with giving it? Okay. I think we're good giving it
So we
a
have.
shot, but like I said, I'll probably ask you when you're in here on a quarterly, how are we doing on this? And come down. I tend to watch things when we make that, okay?
And we probably need to develop a strategy on approaching the legislature for relief of one kind or another.
Yeah.
I don't think they're at all aware that the numbers are so low.
And I would like the numbers that Commissioner Mortensen asked, what do we spend on wages per adolescent
Guest.
in there on an average? Because that would be a powerful number if I sit with Representative Walsh or Senator Wilson and say, look, we're spending this and we can't be the only juvenile facility spending this. We need to figure this out a little better.
I would only change that to say an all-in cost, because even those salaries are bulk, just maintaining the facility. And I think if we were to do that in a completely, I'll use the word honest, even though it doesn't really apply, the cost of maintaining the facility should be represented by an impound account, and all those numbers should come in and say, this is really what it cost us.
Yeah.
Just in this overtime chart with the extra help and the overtime, based upon the average daily population, it's fluctuating. January is like 10,000 per juvenile. And then the rest of the year is on an average about 4,000. That's just the overtime part.
Just the
I know it, and
Yeah.
and I agree with Commissioner Mortensen, although I would like two figures there, because I can say, look at, this is what we have to spend in labor just to watch them,
Right.
and this is what we have to spend on our
And
our
all in.
capital just to keep them. I think both of those figures would have some impact.
Agreed. And
Okay,
Okay, so we can include these two positions in our personnel additions.
And if I
Okay.
could suggest again, the real metric isn't, like you said, 10,000. That's sort of a number I don't understand because it's annualized and it's smeared, but I understand that over the number of hours that you've had, so half a day, it means to me 12 hours. I do the multiplication out, in the end, you're going to get up, 100,000 hours, and it cost us so many.
Okay.
appreciate the time and help.
Thank you.
I know
Thank
it's
you,
not-
commissioners.
Not always an easy subject, but sometimes you gotta hash those things out.
Yeah, I think it was worthwhile discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting us go first.
Yeah, absolutely. Susan, you got 15 minutes.
Yeah, the problem is if you don't want to answer the questions in a tractable manner, it leads to ill will and bad decisions and.
So good afternoon, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. Well, I've kind of lost my train of thought, so please forgive
It's
me.
all
I
right, I've
was-
got to calm down.
Hmm?
It's all right, I've got to calm down.
Yeah, so I was reading about PFAS, which is always an interesting and exciting subject, and
About PCOS?
PFAS,
Oh,
per and
PFAS,
pro
yeah.
fluorocarbon, yes. The firefighting stuff that's now becoming an issue in our drinking water and all the new,
Polyethylene has to be in there somewhere for the chairman's benefit, right?
what's that?
Polyethylene something. has to
Yeah,
be in there
yeah.
somewhere.
Well, but there's, so just reading about the latest and learning, refreshing organic chemistry. So my brain's kind of in a different spot. So 6-year plan, road budget, all that fun and excitement. So I've handed out to you my drafts that are been submitted or are being submitted for SEPA for the 6-year plan that shows the first number of years with project descriptions and cost breakdowns, and then the full 6-year table. For the high level, in 2025, the 6-year plan has a total of $26 million of projects, which is a very big, aggressive year. You guys have heard most of these, so I guess, what's your pleasure? How deep do you want me to dive into this? Do we want to talk about 2025? Do we want to talk about where we're going in the future? Your feel, you've heard a lot of these 2025 projects repeatedly because we work through them. Are you more interested in the design? Are you more interested in what I'm planning on building next year? I kind of wanted to get your feel, so I don't have a good script.
I would suggest that if you had, that you would ask us the questions that you think you'd like answered for this. And then if we ask you questions, that's just, mostly I do it because I'm curious, but I really don't want to take time away from our real fundamental purposes to work with you to make a decision on what's important and not. So, and you might have questions. I don't know what they might be unless you ask them.
Okay.
That sound all right? I got a nod.
So next year we have a plethora of projects planned, two of which we have been talking about for a very long time, the South Cloverdale project and the Dyke Road project, both ones that I know both the board, the public, and Public Works is very excited to get up and running. Those are our two biggest projects that we're planning on next year. We also have a bridge replacement project up in the Riderwood area on Allender Road. So that is an exciting, it's extremely load rated. So, and on an Allender Road, which and even an empty log truck cannot go across this bridge. So we have federal funding. We're going to replace it, and then they can start using log trucks on that bridge again.
Which one is Allender?
So Allender, as you're coming into Riderwood, it's off to your right.
Oh, okay.
Prior to,
I've seen it.
yes.
got it.
So it skirts the Lewis County line.
Right.
So it's the most northern road. And the creek that comes under this bridge, right before it comes under this bridge, is actually in Lewis County. We did have to obtain some temporary construction easements in Lewis County to do this project. So it's an interesting project.
Question on Cloverdale.
Yes.
That is if you had asked me, tell me about busy areas, I would not have picked Cloverdale. Am I not correct?
So Cloverdale is, I didn't bring with me, but I can bring what our current ADT is. It's a little skewed right now because of all the construction this summer, where a lot of people use Cloverdale to get it to Green Mountain, go up and over. It is one of our roads that is feeling development pressure because of all the development going up on Green Mountain and the other roads. So it's becoming a more used road. That is why it's a busier road. It is a collector, which is the second highest classification of roadways. So.
Okay. On stuff like that too, I would imagine you can picture that 10 years from now, it may gain even more importance than what you can see right now, because it may be the only throughway back south to between Kalama and Woodland, right?
Yes.
Does that put pressure on you to make this be a higher class road?
So yes, it does eventually put pressure on us. And then there's a reclassification of the roads is a function of the Technical Advisory Committee that COG and the MPO and RPTO review the roads periodically on what we feel are collectors and arterials that are important to make them eligible for federal and state funding grants, because I'd say 90% of our grants can only be used on arterials and collectors. The FEMA money can go to any classification of road. Federal and state only goes to high classification, with the exception of bridges. Any bridge on any road is part of the National Bridge Inventory and eligible for the bridge grants.
What tools do you have available to you to one of the roads, by example, is it may be 40 years before much traffic increases. Other ones, you're pretty suspicious. but you want to build them to good quality in the right of way. Do you have latitude? Like, I think this one is going to grow.
Yes.
And people tend to, we need a right of way that allows you to grow into it. Is that something a tool you have available to you for
I don't track,
reserving land?
I don't track ADT trends or reserve lands that look ripe for development actively. It is something that is in the back of our mind. Another area that's growing quite a bit is Rose Valley.
Yeah.
We're getting more and more growth out in the Tootle area. And so we do a priority array every year, which I did not bring with me this, but I will have it
A
in
little
the next
bit then,
meeting.
so I'm thinking, as you're going in there, we often sit here and authorize making a purchase of another 10 feet for this or that. That's the kind of thing that this is the right time to plan. If we can purchase right away to allow for 20 years from now kind of thing. I know it's a money thing, but it's also, this one I think is going to be quite key.
So you're like early right-of-way acquisition, there are steps that you can do. And it's a whole process so that so if we had purchased our right-of-way, let's say 20 years ago, knowing that Green Mountain was going to explode because they had a good crystal ball back then.
Yeah.
If you don't follow the right-of-way steps correctly, then you have to go back and repurchase it. It's one of those funky state things. So we tend not to pre-purchase. We do require, strongly encourage, whatever words you want to say, when development is occurring. So let's say you owned 50 acres on Cloverdale Road and you wanted to divide it up, and the right-of-way was only 40 feet. We'd request an additional 10 feet on your side because our standard is 60 to be able to put these roads in. So that is something that is done regularly. So as development is occurring, we are getting the right-of-way so that 20 years from now, when we do have to upgrade a road, that section is done. But if you own the property and you aren't doing anything with it, we're not knocking on your door saying, hey, we have this pie in the sky idea that 20 years from now, we're going to expand the road. We'd like to buy right of way now. So we don't have an active early acquisition program.
Right, and understandable, and I wouldn't advocate eminent domain exercise or anything like that. I am thinking one lane roads sometimes become 2 lanes. I'm talking just
Yes.
one side. And just that kind of thinking, I know it's done in lots of areas. And I know I've been an idiot when I've been in some of those areas and I say, who's the brain dead idiot that bought this big, you put in a big road, only to find out that I was the idiot because 10 years down the road, it was quite heavily used. Okay, you know,
Susan, if memory serves me right, and that's assuming a lot sometimes, we gave some money to Kalama for the construction of a water tank,
yeah.
probably about 6 years ago,
No,
rural,
not quite that long ago.
rural economic development. I'm thinking it's a little farther up Cloverdale rather than at Converse, still pretty rural, pretty large lots. Do you recall?
I don't recall where that is. I have a vague niggling in the back of my brain, but I'm not sure where that is.
Because certainly we end up owning the problem when we are partners with folks who expand infrastructure that
Mhm.
makes it more attractive for development. And there's plenty of buildable land out there, so it makes sense. But 2-acre minimum lots doesn't encourage a whole lot of development, and,
And
putting in the infrastructure for water service is a key driver for more than rural development. So
Right, and this area does have water in it, which will be upgraded during this project.
because it's, and again, I don't remember it completely, but it seems like it was to improve service, so bigger capacity,
Mhm.
which also creates more pressure, I think, as well. So it's
That's
on
it.
its way, but I think it's up a little farther north along Cloverdale.
I think you're correct, but your question is totally apropos in San Diego County. If you were trying to do a little research, you go to the phone companies and the utilities, and they would say, yeah, we're putting in extra dark fiber here, we're putting this and that. And you say, oh, okay, they've already done the homework. They're private enterprise saying, that's where my money's gonna come from. That tells you immediately the question that you were just suggesting that.
I was reading an article in the Cowlitz County Quarterly about the development of Ponderosa out in Lexington, and how the land was low and the water table was very high, and any extra rainwater just caused all sorts of problems. And they didn't want to put in sewer lines. And so they had community they ended up building cesspools instead of doing it the right way, and county let them get away with it initially. And it caused nothing but problems. And ultimately there was a lawsuit, and ultimately we agreed to force them into the Beacon Hill Sewer and Water District, and they had to get the sewer lines. Much more expensive to have done it after the fact than when the construction was being done. Around the same amount of time, based on that experience, trying to clean up, the county commissioners did agree to the sewer line development out on Hall Road, and that, near the Tootle area.
Mhm.
And of course, that has continued to grow. It's taken a while. It's taken a little bit longer, because that was about 30 years ago, but that was planned correctly. It's just a little bit too remote for more immediate growth. I guess that's a long way of saying the institution sometimes gets it right, but we don't necessarily. It's all about the standards that you insist that developers have to follow, and developers have to spend a lot of money, and they don't want to.
True.
They come to us for relief. Sometimes they're helpful, and sometimes we can't, but.
You mentioned something, maybe it was yesterday, and I thought that was pretty neat. It should always be on the forefront of our mind, which is if you're doing work in this area, you can do another project right next to it, maybe more conveniently.
Mhm.
Or maybe you need to back off because you've already clogged traffic up. Maybe come back in 2 years when they've forgotten how bad you made their life for a while.
It's usually more than 2 years before the public forgets how bad the traffic was.
I never do arithmetic in public.
So we do have our two big corridor projects, a bridge project, another fish barrier removal project out on Garlock. Just kind
So,
of,
that reminds me, on the Cloverdale, you mentioned that Bybee Creek might be upgraded to meet Fish Passage. Will that,
it will be.
does that qualify for Glenn Abbott, Bob Abbott,
Oh, Brian Abbott.
Brian Abbott?
In this case, because we haven't gone through the process, it wouldn't. I'm not sure if that one would have ranked high because of the potential downstream blockages of the railroad and I-5. That's why, if you notice, a lot of our Brian Abbott projects tend to be the west of the Cowlitz, along the Coweeman, because they don't have the downstream blockages. And then we're now moving our way up into Tootle, starting on some of the projects up there. So that is why we look at them the way we've been looking at them.
I'm still hoping to I'm still hoping you'll be able to figure out a way to finance a Burke Creek connection to the Woodland Bottoms, right underneath that freeway. And while you're at it, you stick a bike path in it.
Oh, yeah.
So that is Eric
Is
Creek?
Burke Creek.
Burke Creek.
That's the one that comes right down, right at the end of Cloverdale,
Oh,
off of Green Mountain.
yeah, I'm not 100% sure which one that is. Burris Creek is the one that comes by exit 20, not 21, 22. Burris Creek comes down on that side, and that's been rerouted under the highway.
You said Birch?
Burris, B-U-R-R-I-S, Burris.
Burris. Okay.
Burris is,
Yeah, no, Burke.
Burke is the
the
next
creek.
one up. Yeah, I don't,
That's the one you're talking
That's the
about, yeah.
one. That's the one where the bike path ends because it can't get through.
yeah. No, I haven't looked into that one.
Of course, going into the freeway means it's not county dollars, is it?
No.
Unless you do it at night. A question on the first page for Cloverdale.
Yes, there is a math error on that page. I saw it
Okay.
as soon as I opened it. I went, oh, first page, I have an error.
And how were you intended for us to read that? Expenditures is what, like, I don't see anything in engineering. I just see the lump sum.
That's because when they have us do the 6-year plan, it's from this year forward. It's not the entire
why,
project cost. So that is something, if you have the interest, especially on these ones that are going to construction, I could add previous expenditures line to tell you how much we have spent to date on that project.
Can you do it in the next 2 months?
Yes.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we could easily do this before that could easily be added prior to the budget hearing. So
No,
we'll get Sean on it right now.
yeah, but you know, Sean will always ask us, what number would you like there?
What do you want? Ooh, we're not talking about landfill. So when engineering and right away have zero, that's because it's already been spent. It's already been.
Yeah, it's already spent. We've already completed those phases. I mean, this one is literally, and we're tying up the specs and making sure we have all of our Ts crossed and our Is dotted before we go out to add. We did realize we're not going to make the WashDOT deadline of advertisement before November 15th to be able to use the 2024 spec. So we have started that conversion over in our special provisions to the 2025 specials. So that is where we are on South Cloverdale, and that is also where we are on the Allender Bridge. We are in the process of converting them to 2025 specifications and getting them packaged up. Eric Creek Culvert is in here because I didn't know if we were going to finish before the end of the year. It's looking like we may or may not have a last payment next year. I'm guessing we'll end up paving next year on Eric Creek. Hazeldale Wall, which is also ongoing, they were trying to pave today. So I don't know if they made it. Their plan was pave today, guardrail tomorrow, and if the weather holds and they get lucky with the striper being able to swing through, striping this weekend. So we're trying to
That
tie
means
that
we'll
one
be
up.
done on Hazeldale for how many years?
It all depends on if we get the Leckler Creek grant that we applied for.
Oh,
So there's a couple culverts we applied out there, or until we have another landslide.
or earthquake.
Earthquake, yes. So,
Think how they build across faults and then pave over it.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
just keep paving. It'll be there. It's amazing the number of spots we excavate, and we have 12, 18 inches of asphalt. Then you'll find some gravel, and then you'll find another 6 to 12 foot layer, 6 to 12 inch layer of asphalt. It's pretty crazy.
There's something relentless about rain and gravity.
Mhm.
It does create landslides or land movement anyway.
So I guess one of the, for moving forward, I mean, focus on the 6-year plan, and do you guys have a focus or pet projects that you'd like us to be focusing on? And we focus on grants and grant availability. We do run priority arrays for, we have 2 different culvert arrays, one for ones that are small size and then one that are big size. I know that sounds crazy, but anything that we think is going to be a short span or above is on one culvert list. And then we have a culvert list for our smaller anything. A short span is anything 12 to 20 feet. Everything over 20 feet is considered a bridge. And then we have so everything 12 and above is on our one culvert array. Then we have a smaller culvert array that are more jobs like the Kalama River Road jobs. So we keep those up because they're different levels of effort. The Kalama River Road ones are ones doing local dollars, which is something that I've added in new this year, is a running list that's at the end of the 6-year plan. I have a couple catch-all items. One is called ADA upgrades, with the goal to be completing 1 or 2 intersections a year, of replacing our ramps and making that forward effort to upgrade that infrastructure. I also added in a drainage improvements project where CRAB allows you to put projects such as that, those Kalama River Road ones on a list and in a generic category. I've called it drainage improvements. And so that we put, and I think I put, I don't remember what my annual amount was. I think it was 300 or 400,000 a year on the list. So yeah, it was 370 annually, so that we could work on our culvert infrastructure that are bigger than what our road crews want to replace, but need replacing so that we can pull off that list and just pick a project and keep it moving forward. So those are 2 of the newer things that I've added that are allowed. And my end list from project 30 down to 85 are all projects that we're looking at for the future, looking at future funding opportunities. There are several opportunities out there right now. One I'm fairly excited about is a newer USGS opportunity that we're trying to see if we can apply for, that helps you identify your landslides and ways to correct them on areas that we know. So we're looking into, I think Cowlitz County is an ideal candidate for that because we do have a lot of those situations. The Federal Protect just opened this week also, so we'll be looking at a project to do that. And when Federal Protect is more directed at flooding, landslide corrections, ways to protect your infrastructure moving forward, unlike the State Protect, which is all about fish passage. So we're working on that. So I guess my question on those is that's how we really shape our 6-year plan moving forward, because as you guys have learned, a public works project takes, a fast one is 2 years, but an average is 5, and the big projects are more like 10 to 15 years. I'd say the average lifetime of a project on the 6-year plan is probably 15 years from the time it becomes identified as a problem to us finding funding and actually getting the design completed.
So along those lines, I looked through and on your little box on the lower right-hand side, you give us an expenditure schedule, and that's kind of cool. I look and I see the farthest out date is 2027.
Yes, in these boxes, it is 2027, but if you look at these projects, that are in the running list. Some
That's
of
where
them
we
go
go.
out to 2030. Some of them will say construction year past 2030. Actually, I left, there's at least one that says after 2030 for the construction. So
Yeah, I think this is nicely done because there's a lot of time between, well, there's not a lot, but time between now and 2030 could be a lot of changes.
yes,
So this earlier part with the pictures is something you're pretty sure of.
yes.
And the rest of it is like, we have a list.
These are the projects we'd like to fund and build, and this is where we're actively looking for project funding to do these projects. So there's a mix of roadway corridors, drainage, safety projects. There's several intersections in here I'd like to work on.
In the time that I've been in this office, I have had a number of complaints, people who've called in complaining about excessive speeding on roads. And I've noticed that generally those are straightaways.
Mhm.
Sparks Avenue is one that kind of jumps to mind. The other one is Nevada Drive, which is also downhill in a canyon. So it's kind of hard to do anything. The Sparks Drive one might be resolvable with a roundabout, something to slow people down.
Darlene
When-
Johnson's not
when-
gonna like you.
Well, but you don't want it on a truck route, and I get that. 'Cause
Yeah.
But this is primarily a residential street where, you give them straight away and they're gonna speed. And,
Mhm.
Industrial Way has been a speedway since it was built. It's just the nature of the beast. But where the roundabouts in a residential area kind of makes sense. Do you anticipate doing any of that?
I do not anticipate doing any roundabouts. One of the projects in here is Nevada Drive safety improvements that I've had on there, but nobody has had time to come up with a good concept. And sometimes on Nevada Drive, you get people going too fast. Somewhere like Sparks, also some of the techniques that people do is some of the islands in the middle with plantings. We're not big on having to maintain the plantings because our road department is not an urban road department, so that's
Right.
not a normal function for us
At least yet.
yet. So
Every time we approve a subdivision,
it,
it gets closer.
yes, but there's ways to slow people down without doing roundabouts. Giving people a feeling that the road is narrower than it actually is, actually slows people down, which is why those islands do that. Or some people neck the striping down.
There goes my bicycle lane.
Bicycle lanes, I don't know if that actually slows people down or if that speeds you up to see if you can go faster than the biker.
It does that. Or, how many bikers have I hit this month? I'm short one.
I wasn't going there, but I'm sure that is some people's thoughts. So yes, I know, and that it is something that our department will need to start evolving into, getting out of our rural mindset that we have as we do become more urban, like the Lexington neighborhoods and the Columbia Heights neighborhoods that we have currently.
I like traffic circles that you brought up. In Seattle, the old parts of Seattle, they've got traffic circles, but they are so badly done.
Yeah, they didn't change the intersection. They just put it right in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah.
Certainly slows you down. The city of Longview has done an extensive amount of work just this past year and have taken out lanes and have increased parking or bicycle lanes where there hadn't been any. And they're actually taking out stoplights and changing the intersections. And it's amazing. You don't need the stoplights anymore because nobody's there. People have just changed their routes. They're not traveling on those roads anymore. I mean,
Yes.
it's really been a surprise. So I had to change my route to work, so. Made me so upset, I decided to quit.
Could you run through that again? So,
The route that I used to took went through an intersection which no longer allows through traffic. So they
No-
changed intersections. to
no longer allows through traffic?
Through traffic, right.
You mean they
You
closed
could
off a
take a
piece?
left turn at the intersection I'm talking about. It's actually, it's Hudson and Washington Way,
Yeah.
which was, and it had a little island and had little things in there. They ended up reducing it to one lane only. So you can take a left turn off of Washington Way, no problem, but you can't take a left turn on Hudson to get onto Washington Way. So I can only go one way.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, okay, got it.
It was all part of this overall effort to slow traffic down.
Mhm.
But
They
I,
call it traffic calming, and they got a whole bunch of money to do that. But, and it's scary quiet on that street. And Washington Way used to be a pretty busy street.
I think traffic circles here are upset people, but I think they just don't look at it in a straightforward manner. In lots of places, it's a lot cheaper than a traffic signal, and you don't have to sit there at 2 a.m. for a stupid traffic signal that's not helping you. The trouble is, some people don't realize, and it'll take a while. It takes a while to get habits changed. It's a yield sign. Go through it at 15 miles an hour. That means that you don't sit there and wait till the traffic circle's clear. If there's a safe opening, you go. And they just can't seem to get it through their head that that's very efficient.
Well, some of us, it takes a lot of us a long time to change our ways. I'm still waiting for the light to change every day when I get there. Oh, no, it's not even there.
You do remember when, I think it was Sweden changed overnight from left-hand driving to right-hand driving?
Oh.
Yeah, just one day
Oh.
on this date,
You shall.
and the insurance companies loved it.
So the only other, if you had no other items on the 6 year, we also brought you our cash flow that we discussed earlier to show what we're going to do, because we do realize that we have quite a bit of money in our funds because of deferred projects. So if you wanted to go through that, that is Sean's baby.
So which paper are we looking at now? That one?
We'll look at the legal size.
Yeah,
And so
It's
this,
got $18 million up in the upper right. hand.
It does,
left-hand
highlighted.
corner.
the one that looks like the typical answer I get whenever I ask a finance individual, approximately how much is this? Well, here, let me give you a
I'm
spreadsheet.
gonna give you too much information. Yeah. So we've talked about this in the past. Just want to bring it back up since this is a roads budget time. We've gone through the revenues, the expenditures, we've outlaid the projects that Susan just talked about out here, the timelines for those projects and how they're getting reimbursed through grants or ARPA or other local dollars. Just want to make sure everyone is comfortable with this idea and this plan we have here. And don't want to go into too much detail just to repeat ourselves again. And don't know if anyone had any questions from the last time we presented this.
Will there be any more ARPA funds left to be spent after 2025?
I believe we'll have.
There might be a little because Cloverdale may run into 2026, but it's just going in the same way. That is what, if we have any, it's just we're finishing up the projects.
That's actually smart planning. I mean, don't plan for using it in 26 because there are delays all the time.
Water sewer? I think that's just for the roads dollars as well.
But water sewer will be, we're getting them,
better.
we should be getting them all advertised in the next 3 months. And there's potentially one item for the Toutle wastewater treatment plant that'll be a 2026 expense, but it's a delay in being able to obtain the piece of equipment.
And so as we're going through the services lines, we see the same number quite often there. And then you see a jump up in February. That's going to be mostly our internal services billings coming through. So it's not a extra zero or anything in there. Just want to highlight that in the month of February on the services line. We're just looking to see, answer any questions, and have a discussion as needed.
You have a couple of acronyms on the revenue side. CAPP, CAP?
Yeah, CAP. Oh gosh, what does that stand for again? County Arterial Preservation, I forget the second P, and program. Thank you.
Is that one of the CRAB programs?
That is, yeah.
Okay.
And the other one, the motor vehicle fuel tax is going to be the
Fuel
MVFT.
tax, okay. And the timber, is that revenues from harvest, or is it shares of the gas tax?
That's going to be the timber excise tax. So when,
That's harvest.
correct, yes, when timber's harvested in certain areas,
And that's always, it's hard to budget that because it
It
varies,
is.
because depends on DNR.
and we're the third priority. So, schools and smaller districts are going to be the first two priorities. So if we have a great year of timber excise tax coming in, that third priority gets a lot of extras. And we've seen that the last few years on.
But there is the timber that we own,
Hmm.
that they manage for us, about 11,000 acres, so. We have to share, of course, but another resource. I am always impressed with the success you've had with getting the various grants. And 10 million, $11 million is a pretty good haul. And I don't want to be mercenary about it because they're being used for safety and important improvements as well as fish recovery, but didn't used to be that way.
No, it hasn't. And thank you. The staff works really hard on getting these grants out, and we're happy that we've been so successful. We don't get everything. Haven't gotten NOAA grants yet, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There's been several others we've tried for through FEMA, but we keep going back to them and saying, okay, what can we do better, and trying to get them better. So we're working these forward and hope to continue with the success. We'll see. Money availability for infrastructure comes and goes in cycles too. So we've been on a very good cycle right now where there has been a lot of money. I would not be surprised to see that drop again.
In your future thinking mode, do you anticipate any bridge construction, opening up new routes or new locations?
I don't anticipate any, I don't anticipate us building a quote unquote new road anytime soon. There's one new road I'd really like to build at some point. Actually formalizing that emergency bypass that we have for the Ostrander area. I think of all of my roads that I think will get built, that one will probably get built in my lifetime. So that's the Ostrander bypass. I think that would be a good one, benefit the community greatly.
That's currently on an old warehouse or logging road. We have to make agreements whenever the need is.
Yes, and so we have a standing agreement with them for anytime there's an emergency. I have told their property management that if they are ever starting to look at selling that out, please come to us because we'd really like to acquire that right of way, because I think it's vitally important for that. If you want to know some of my dream roads, I'd like to start connecting the end of some of our roads to increase I'll go with the buzzword resiliency for natural disasters, be it flooding, fires, landslides. So like Rose Valley being able to get to Kalama, to Mount Pleasant, to Allen Street and further north. I'd like to start getting some of those connections made. I don't know if or when that would happen, but I think that would be a good community. And then on the west side, connecting all of Germany, Abernathy, all of the creek roads at other places besides SR4. We have some of those set up, but it would be nice to have a better connection.
If Willow Grove ever gets to the point where it becomes a residential development, I think there would probably just about have to be a bridge to cross the slough, at least one. Right now, it's a big loop and it's a one-way entry and exit. That's problematic for safety, but population is not very big yet, so they just have to figure out a way to construct sewers that they can logically construct out there, but
Yes,
you know,
so.
we're not building any more flat land for people to build on, so that's one of the areas.
The miscellaneous revenue, that's the interest on your money?
The majority of that would be interest on our investment earnings. Yes,
And you
sir.
just flattened it out through the year?
100%.
Yeah.
We took our prior 12 months rolling and took a little bit more conservative approach on that too, anticipating some rate drops over the next year.
What kind of interest rate are you looking at?
So I don't know the exact rate. I took our actual earnings and took an 85% of that.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
I didn't consider the interest rate itself. I took our last 12 months roll.
Oh, okay, you
And then
just took a
reduced.
number based on experience.
Mhm.
Okay.
Deb invests that for us,
Yes, sir.
and the rates are always changing anyway, but
I try and figure out what the analysts say about interest rates and are they negative real or positive real? And any answer I want, I can find.
Yeah,
you've just discovered the magic of economics.
yeah.
Well, it's pretty crazy because all of us individuals need to figure out whether we're going to go into inflation or deflation, and there are always scares on both sides. Makes a big difference if you're facing retirement, like a couple of us are here.
But only two of us.
Only two of us. The other one I heard is going to serve 5 terms.
Yeah, yeah.
Could be.
You better get out your phone and turn that little unit up. Looks good.
You know, we have a landfill. We don't have an oil well, though.
Not yet.
Yeah, that's the answer I was looking for. We could have a gas well.
Not if Olympia gets their way.
Hmm?
Not if Olympia gets their way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that that's a permanent conclusion. It just doesn't, it's so outlandishly ridiculous that it.
Yep.
Hmm. Okay, you've proven your point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon.
We had a copy of a quitclaim deed. Was that? is
That,
there-
I have one miscellaneous.
Oh, that's it. huh?
This is, I was gonna bring you up to speed on what's going on over at the expo with the
Great.
hotel.
Mhm.
And Brian sent me this because I wanted to identify when the date was that had to revert
Recent.
back. And you see
Oh.
that's February of this coming year. So just kind of give you guys a heads up and see what you want to do with that. I can tell you where they're at with the hotel. The parent company of La Quinta came down, Wyndham, and they went through it. They still have some concerns that it's a distance from the freeway and have concerns of Fifth Avenue where the access is because it's kind of older homes. But other than that, they're not totally discrediting it at this point. And the builder is still interested in doing this. In fact, there's a meeting next week on Wednesday at 11 over at the Expo. They've asked me to come over. I'm sure you gentlemen could pop in there and visit with them too. There's still some interest in, Brent's very interested in doing this thing. He recognizes that we're a little farther, but I think he believes the plan that if that's there, it's going to be busy with the Expo and the other things they have planned. So they will be asking us to extend this. I personally don't have an issue, but it's, you know, it's all three of us that have to decide what we want to do with that and what kind of time frame we want to give them.
Not the three of us.
Well, it could for the moment.
Yeah,
I think it was a hard task to get to this point. I don't think I'd want to retrace those steps.
meaning letting this lapse and then having to try and redo it over again.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
Yeah,
As long
So-
as there's interest on, going forward.
yeah.
I look at this
The
as just a matter
timeframe-
of time.
The timeframe, the builder gave, if they went ahead, was like he said you probably won't see a building for like 2 years. So if we were to extend this, it sounds to me like the logical one would be
Another 5.
yeah.
Yeah.
Another how many?
5, probably.
Yeah. The fundamental question is, do we believe this is a good thing overall to do? And I think the answer is probably yes. And so
yeah.
it's going to take however long it's going to take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think it's, once that's there, then I think a lot of things start to fall in place over there. I think has a real viable future.
So you attended a meeting?
They have one coming up next Wednesday. They've
okay.
asked me over to, and they'll have the builder there that, who I know. And I think maybe even Wyndham or somebody might be down again.
The builder is someone from your past?
Yes, I went to high school with him.
Oh,
He just built, if you go through Centralia, that La Quinta you see off to the,
Mm.
if you're heading northbound, that's his, that he just completed.
is he the investor also then?
He owns it and pays a franchise fee to La Quinta.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that sounds hopeful.
Yeah. So if you think that's a good thing, I can have Doug start to look at how we do that, if we're all okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, yeah, all right. And like I said, if you want to, it's next Wednesday at 11 a.m.
Not tomorrow, next week.
Next Wednesday, the 6th. I believe it's the 6th. It's Wednesday at 11 a.m. And I'm sure they'd be more than pleased to have you sit in and,
Depending on
see
what
it.
happens on Tuesday, we might not be in the mood to be
well, that's true.
having a good time,
Yeah,
or we might be.
yeah.
So Dennis, if both groups that are vying for the positions we occupy now, if they both just say, no, we're not going to serve at all, that mean we have to stay on?
I don't think so, because we're elected for a set length of time.
But there's
It's not one of
something
those
about,
until successor is chosen.
yeah, that's the question. Does it apply to this seat?
No, uh,
I think it does, but
I don't think so.
I hope
Just-
you're right.
It just means Rick is in charge of figuring out how to appoint.
It means
Well,
I
we-
won't have much to do, just one person. I can't make the decision.
If neither one of them,
Yeah,
well, you can't make the decision by yourself anyway. You have to-
right.
So
right.
your friend, the governor, will be appointing somebody
Oh, God.
to give you a quorum.
Huh.
No, I don't
We
think
always
that,
have fun.
with as much time, effort, and energy and resources that they've been pouring into the campaign, I can't believe they're going to walk away from it.
That was the miscellaneous I had.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If there's nothing else.
No public comments.
Okay, we will adjourn. Thank you. Good work.
Oh, do we
By the
have a
way,
meeting
thank you.
tomorrow? We have meeting tomorrow.